In 2019, investigators in New York were tracking a strange pattern. High-end electronics were appearing in luxury Manhattan stores without ever passing through official distributors. Rare collectibles were moving across the city faster than professional traders could track. Millions of dollars in goods were changing hands every month. But there was no company behind it. No storefront. No warehouse. Just whispers about one name. Ethan Cruz, a 23-year-old delivery driver who had somehow built a shadow trading empire across New York City. And the strangest part? Ethan never invented a product. He never started a company. He simply noticed something everyone else ignored. In cities like New York, prices aren't equal. And where prices aren't equal, there's opportunity. 2 years earlier, Ethan Cruz was just another exhausted driver navigating the chaos of New York streets. He delivered packages, electronics, furniture, boxes he never opened and rarely thought about. Every day looked the same. Traffic, angry customers, late deliveries. At night, he returned to a cramped apartment in Queens with barely enough money to pay rent. His bank account rarely held more than a few $100s. But Ethan had one unusual habit. While most drivers rushed between deliveries, Ethan observed everything. He noticed which neighborhoods bought expensive products, which stores had empty shelves, which areas had items nobody seemed interested in. Most people saw the city as noise. Ethan started seeing patterns. One rainy evening, something small caught his attention. He had just delivered a gaming console to a store in Manhattan. The retail price? $499. Later that night, he stopped at a small electronic shop in Brooklyn. The exact same console was selling for $720. At first, Ethan assumed it was a mistake, but then he started checking. Everywhere. Headphones, sneakers, vintage cameras, collectible toys. The prices were never the same. Sometimes the difference was small. Sometimes it was enormous. And suddenly Ethan realized something powerful. The city wasn't one market. It was hundreds of tiny markets colliding with each other. And between those markets, there were gaps. Price gaps, demand gaps, knowledge gaps. And Ethan had access to all of them. Because every day, he traveled through the entire city. Ethan decided to test something. Not a big gamble. Just a small experiment. He opened his banking app and stared at the number on the screen. $120. That was everything he had left. For most people, spending their last $120 would feel reckless. But Ethan wasn't thinking about the money. He was thinking about the pattern he had been noticing all over the city. Different neighborhoods, different prices, different buyers. If the pattern was real, then $120 might be enough to prove it. That afternoon, Ethan stepped into a small pawn shop in Queens. The place smelled like old metal and dust. Shelves were crowded with random items nobody seemed to want anymore. Broken speakers, old watches, outdated cameras. Most customers walked in looking for something specific. Ethan was looking for something misunderstood. And then he saw it. A vintage film camera sitting quietly in a glass case. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't rare. But it looked well built and oddly underpriced. The tag read, $120. Ethan asked the owner about it. The man barely looked up. "Take it if you want it," he said. "I've had that thing sitting here for months." Months. That single word caught Ethan's attention. If it had been sitting there for months, maybe the seller simply didn't know who wanted it. Ethan thought about the photography shops he passed every week in Manhattan. Different customers, different demand, different prices. So he took the risk. He handed over his last $120 and walked out of the pawn shop holding the camera. The next day, during a delivery route in Manhattan, Ethan made a small detour. He walked into a photography store filled with expensive lenses and professional gear. The kind of place where collectors and serious photographers shopped. Ethan placed the camera on the counter. "Do you guys buy vintage equipment?" he asked casually. The store owner picked it up and inspected it carefully. He turned it over, checked the lens, looked through the viewfinder. For a few seconds, he said nothing. Then he looked back at Ethan and said something Ethan would never forget. "I can give you $450 for it." For a moment, Ethan thought he misheard. $450. Less than 24 hours earlier, that same camera had been sitting in a pawn shop collecting dust. Ethan tried to stay calm as he nodded. "Yeah," he said, "that works." When he walked out of the store, the city felt different. The streets looked the same. The traffic sounded the same. But something in Ethan's mind had shifted. In one day, he had made more money than an entire week of deliveries. And the most interesting part wasn't the profit. It was how simple it had been. He didn't build a product. He didn't invent anything. He didn't even negotiate. He simply moved something from a place where nobody wanted it to a place where someone did. And suddenly a thought started forming in his mind. What if this wasn't luck? What if the entire city worked like this? What if New York wasn't just one market, but hundreds of small markets that didn't talk to each other? And if that was true, then Ethan Cruz had just discovered something powerful. Not a job, Not a side hustle, but a system. Ethan began experimenting. Every day after work, he visited small stores across the city. Pawn shops, garage sales, local markets, flea markets. He wasn't looking for valuable items. He was looking for misunderstood items. Things people priced incorrectly. Old electronics, luxury watches, rare sneakers, collectibles. Ethan developed a simple rule. Buy where nobody sees value. Sell where everyone wants it. Within 3 months, his profits were growing. Then something bigger happened. Store owners started recognizing him. They began calling him when unusual items appeared. Collectors started contacting him for hard-to-find pieces. Ethan wasn't just flipping items anymore. He was becoming a bridge between markets. Soon he built a quiet network. Pawn shop owners, resellers, collectors, luxury buyers. Each one knew Ethan as the guy who could find anything. And the numbers kept growing. $500 deals became $5,000 deals. $5,000 deals became $50,000 shipments. Within a year, Ethan Cruz was moving millions of dollars worth of goods across New York. And almost nobody outside his network knew he existed. But opportunity attracts attention. Competitors began appearing. Some were aggressive. Others were dangerous. Deals became more complicated. Sometimes the origin of certain items wasn't clear. Sometimes sellers asked no questions because they didn't want answers. The bigger Ethan's network became, the more pressure surrounded him. Late-night meetings, risky transactions, unpredictable partners. The city that once felt like a playground of opportunity started feeling like a maze. Because the deeper Ethan went into the underground trading world, the harder it became to tell where business ended and trouble began. And that's when Ethan realized something most people never understand about fast money. The rise is exciting, but the speed of the rise creates its own gravity. Years later, people would still talk about Ethan Cruz. Some said he made millions. Others said he disappeared quietly from the markets. But one lesson from his story remained clear. Ethan didn't become wealthy because he worked harder than everyone else. Thousands of people in New York worked harder. He became wealthy because he noticed what everyone else ignored. Price differences, knowledge gaps, inefficient markets, where most people saw chaos. Ethan saw opportunity. And the truth is, those gaps exist everywhere. In every city, in every market, in every industry. Because the world isn't perfectly organized. Information moves slowly. People make mistakes. And wherever there's confusion, there's value waiting to be discovered. The real question isn't whether opportunity exists. It always does. The real question is whether someone is paying attention. Because sometimes the biggest fortunes aren't built by inventing something new. Sometimes they're built by simply asking one question. Why does this cost more somewhere else? And once you start seeing those gaps, you begin to realize something powerful. Opportunity was never rare. It was just invisible. Until someone like Ethan Cruz decided to look.